On live stream. My name is Jackie Patterson, and I am with the Chisholm Legacy Project, which is a resource hub for Black frontline climate justice leadership. I am super honored to have this wonderful set of panelists who are going to be discussing today. And I'm not going to take long in introductory remarks, just give you a sense of who's here, and then we'll get right into it. So here we have on our panel Mela Shapanda, who is the Climate and Gender Advisor for FemNet. We have Adrienne Hollis, who is the Vice President of Environmental Justice, Health, and Community Revitalization for the National Wildlife Federation. And we have Yershel Rodriguez, who is an environmental engineer with the University of Columbia. And we have Amira Woods, who's the Executive Director of the Green Leadership Trust. So we've really got, there's a treat in store for you today with this awesome conversation we're going to have. As you may or may not know, the environmental and the program of the NAACP actually is right here in the room. We have Abreu Connor. Sorry. Yes. Yep. And I was with the NAACP for 11 years, and it was a blessing to be a part of that work. And out of that work, I really was inspired to do this work around environmental and climate justice with a gendered lens as well. And so started this organization, the Chisholm Legacy Project. And so that has been amazing to quickly start in July of 2021 and to grow to where we are today. We have partnered with the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance and others to form the Global Afro-Descendant Climate Justice Collaborative. And out of that work, which Denise Abdul Rahman, who is also here, has been anchoring, thank you. She has been anchoring that weekly meetings of the Global Afro-Descendant Climate Justice Collaborative. And the idea of that group is to really bring together people of African descent from all over the globe to unify around a Black liberation agenda within the climate justice agenda. And so we've been having some deep conversations about what that looks like. And so for us, out of that arose this resolution that we've put together, race, racism, and climate reparations in the UNFCCC. So we've seen talk about gender justice, we've seen talk about human rights being integrated into the UNFCCC, but we really haven't seen substantive conversations around colonialism, white supremacy, race, and racism show up in the conversations, in the text, in the constituency groups. So with this resolution, and I think if you don't have a copy, Denise has some to give out maybe. Denise, do you have any? No, okay, well, if you don't have any, you can check out www.thechisholmlegacyproject.org, and you can see the resolution in 6 languages, in English, in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese, Kiswahili, and Arabic. So feel free to check that out. Otherwise, today, we will be talking about that very resolution on race, racism, and climate reparations through a feminist lens. And so I'm super excited to have this critical conversation because we all know that intersectionality means that these issues should not be discussed separately, that they are quite intersectional. So without further ado, I am going to sit down and we're going to go through some questions. But first off, we're going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start with Yershel. And if you could just introduce yourself and say I think the mic, yep. And then we'll bring it down to Adrienne. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Yershel Rodriguez. I am an environmental engineer from the National University of Colombia, and I am also part of the Raizal indigenous Afro-descendant community in the islands of Old Providence and Santa Catalina in the Caribbean Sea. And I have been in the climate justice activism like since I was born, because we are frontliners in climate change. We have been struck numerous times by hurricanes, and I have understood from very early stages, for our voice to be heard, we have to be putting ourselves out there in these platforms, so we could really seek for climate justice for our territories.
Thank you very much. My name is Melania Chiponda, and I'm a development practitioner, and I come from the academic space, but most of all, I'm an activist. I'm an environment and land defender, and as well that places me in the climate justice space. I come from Zimbabwe's Eastern Highlands, bordering with Mozambique. I think that place is one of the most climate vulnerable areas in the whole world. And I'm working currently with Feminist as the climate and gender advisor. And my work cuts across Africa, the whole continent. And I'm very happy to be discussing this issue on race and climate justice, because I identify largely as a Pan-African eco-feminist or ecological feminist. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. I am Amira Woods, so honored to be here this morning. Thank you, those who are joining us in person and those who are joining us virtually. I am from Liberia, living outside of Washington, D.C. I'm the executive director of the Green Leadership Trust. We are Black, brown, and indigenous people on boards of environmental organizations. And so I am so honored to be on this panel with two of the leaders of GLT, Jackie and Adrian, and also to have other members of GLT, including our co-chair, here with us today. I come from West Africa along the Atlantic, where we are already suffering the ravages, really, of rising sea. And so we look forward to having a conversation today where we talk about that. But I feel like I have one foot on each side. So I'm also seeing the Potomac right in Washington, D.C., and the repercussions on Black communities right there that are already feeling devastation because of how decisions were made around economic and structural policy in Washington, D.C., in the nation and around the world. So we're here today to talk about the intersection of feminism, of race, of justice. We want to center a conversation on justice, and we look forward to having that dialogue, especially to lift up the importance of race and including the resolution in the UNFCCC agenda. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adrienne Hollis. I am as Jackie said, the Vice President for Environmental Justice and a bunch of other things at the National Wildlife Federation. I've been working in the environmental justice field for almost 30 years. I am from Alabama. I like to tell the story as to why I do this work. I grew up in Mobile, which is, Alabama being one of the most racially segregated areas that I know. We live maybe 5 minutes from Africatown, which I hope most people are familiar with. So I am not from Africatown, unfortunately. I'm from around the corner, as they say. But I tell the story of how when I was young and my mom had given me a white swimsuit, and we could only go to certain beaches. And the beach we went to was, of course, polluted because that is where we were placed, so to speak. And I had been in the water for 5 minutes, and I came out and the suit was black because of the oil in the water. And that's the kind of environment in which we lived. That and the fact that my family and friends, kids growing up, suffered from asthma. And because of the economic oppression or economic apartheid, as it is known in circles, my mom and others couldn't afford medicine for asthma. And the route that was sort of they were directed to take was to hold the kids over the bathtub and run the hot water and hope that would open up the airways. And I remember my mom doing that. So that is the environment from which I come. And I work at the intersection of racism, environmental justice, health, and of course, issues around climate, because you can't talk about climate without talking about health and environmental justice. So very happy to be here and to share the stage with these phenomenal women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think you'll see why these were the women that we chose to have this conversation. Yershel, I didn't know from before, but she was part of we were doing a daily talk show every day from here called the Afro Beats Live talk show that Denise Abdul Rahman is producing and moderating. And so feel free to check that out at 8 p.m. Eastern, Egypt time every day. And so Yershel, when she came onto the show, I was just blown away by her remarks. So she's a new friend, and but I'm definitely looking forward to work at deepening our work together. And Mela, I had admired from afar when I was with ActionAid International. I encountered her decades ago, and her amazing work, and really just being such a strong voice around a feminist lens around environmental and climate justice. And Amira also probably doesn't even remember when I first met her, when she was co-facilitating a workshop around the feminist economy with Pam Spar, a dear mutual friend, way back in the day. And Adrian, of course, also for the last, I don't know, 7, 8 years, we've been working together since she came, and was with We Act, has worked with the federal government, and has worked with Union of Concerned Scientists, and now with the National Wildlife Federation, just spreading her light wherever she goes. So I'm honored to share the stage with these awesome women. So we'll just get right into it. The first question. In the United States, racism is top of mind for black people. As an example, when I first encountered the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance in 2009, they were marching through the halls of the UNFCCC gathering at that time in Copenhagen, chanting, 2 degrees is suicide. And as a group of black folks saying that, I thought to myself, like, why aren't they saying 2 degrees is genocide? Because that's the lens that I'm always thinking of in terms of the fact that our communities, our nations are least responsible for climate change, but yet in the industrialized nations that are operating under colonialism and white supremacy are the reasons that this is happening, and it's reaching us first and worst. But then over the years, and working with Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance and others, I've started to kind of understand and deepen the understanding of what this notion of race means, the prominence of race in the dialogue and discourse, and the extent to which racism is Thank you. Okay. To the extent to which racism is a part of the conversation varies. And so since each of you are from different places, originally or now, I'm just wondering, to what extent is racial justice a part of your activism? And if you want to start with Yershel, do you want to?
Yeah, well, the question, I guess, is answer itself just like by being an Afro-descendant woman. Like the race have like crossed the like everything you do. Like in my case, I am also from this vulnerable community, but also I am part of a minority in my country because I am Afro-descendant, but I am also a racial person, and that's like the way we have named ourselves in our island as this community. So we're also like vulnerable in various stages, and in the activism I do, it's really about who we are. It's really about my community, and it's about protecting our livelihoods and also protecting us from extinction. Because for me, it's like going extinct as culture, as a person that has a view, a collective view of how we want to live our life or how we want to pursue our future. Because just to take back a little, in my island, we have the 3rd greatest coral reef barrier. So we're also the guardians of one of the most important ecosystems in the whole globe. We are also biosphere reserve. So we are the stewards of these type of ecosystems. And we know that indigenous folks, black folks, we are the protectors of the 80% of the ecosystem that are still healthy and that are still helping us and that are still giving us life. So for me, in my activism, it has always been about who I am, who I represent, and to feel represented in these spaces. That's why we put ourselves out there, like to make a stand and understand that our communities have been vulnerabilized like from the beginning. And like I didn't want to like became an activist. Like I didn't like wake up one day and like, oh, I want to be an activist. Like I just had to become, because like everything was pushing us, and everything is pushing us to become activists, because who will speak for us if we don't speak up for ourselves as black women, as indigenous women, as local communities. So yeah, it's really about race.
Thank you very much. For me, racism is something that I was born knowing that there's something wrong. I was born in the middle of our liberation struggle, and when I grew up, I don't remember my childhood with my father, because my father was fighting colonialism. He was part of the liberation movement, and he had gone to Mozambique to fight. And I knew that there's something not right with me not having a father and staying with a grandmother who was a peasant farmer. And I have often described my childhood with my grandma as a peasant childhood. And so many times I've heard people say, you know, when you mention the word peasant, it is insulting. I say it is not insulting. It's just like saying black person. I know in the US, people are called people of color, but I identify as a black woman. And because I don't understand this idea of people of color, I know it's okay, but I don't understand it. And so when I grew up, after 1980, when I was in first grade, there was the liberation euphoria of now we are independent, right? But then I could feel things were not okay. They were not okay, because we were promised there is going to be electricity, you're going to be living in all these nice houses, you now have the same rights. Because as I was in the first grade, the nearest school was a white school. And I couldn't go there because I was black. I used to walk a very long distance to get to the black school. But then soon after independence, my father coming from the war, we couldn't afford the school that was nearby. Why? Because I later realized as I was growing up that the system is so perfected. And currently, as I mentioned that I'm also a development practitioner, apart from being an activist, I realized that the promises of we are going to get electricity. Electricity was never meant for us. And this is why in Africa, of the 800 billion living in energy poverty, more than half a billion are in Africa, because the system is perfected in such a way that it is extremely expensive for any government in Africa to be able to provide electricity to the places where the poor black people are living. And when colonialism started, and I know I'm going to get to the climate crisis, just give me 2 minutes. When colonialism started, it didn't come as colonialism, believe me on that. Cecil Rhodes came as a miner to do exploration for minerals in my country. But for all we know, there is documentation of now the king was complaining that he has taken control of everything, but he was there to do business, right? And then black people were moved to disaster-prone areas. And this is why currently racism and climate justice are intertwined, and particularly the life of a black woman, because all the people were pushed to disaster-prone areas, including my ancestors. What I'm mentioning, that we were living in a village, that village is in the mountains. And not because the mountains are bad, but the mountains were never intended for people to live there. But we live there. And one of the most, the biggest injustice is how also our knowledge as Black African women, we hold the knowledge of the mountains, the knowledge of the rivers, the knowledge of the forests. My grandma did. And I remember when Cyclone Idai hit on 15 March, it was towards my birthday. On 15 March, just before that, old people were saying that there are some rains. You know, Black African women working on the land, they understand the environment so much. They say they feel something not right in their bodies. And that was the cyclone. And on 15 March, 3,000 people perished in Zimbabwe and Mozambique. And that area is an area where traditionally people are not supposed to live there. But also, the people that perished, of all the 3,000, they are Black peasant people. They are commercial farms, which are owned by the commercial farmers, the majority of them white. None of them perished. And they say that they have access to information, access to this knowledge. And I always think they have privilege because of their skin. My grandma has knowledge, a lot of it, but she perished. Why? Because she was forced to be, because of racism, she was forced to live in a disaster-prone area. And this is where, for me, I feel not fighting for racial justice. For a person like myself, I feel sometimes it's privilege. Thank you very much. I have so many stories to tell because I'm a Black woman whose life has so many stories to tell. But I'm going to leave this time to Amira. Thank you.
We are inspired by those stories, so keep them coming. So for me, the activism started in Liberia when I was very young. And I have to say, Liberia and Ethiopia are the two countries on the continent that were never colonized, formally. But we well know, right? And for me, the story begins back in 1926. You all know the company Firestone? Firestone, yeah, big international conglomerate. Firestone entered Liberia in 1926 and essentially took over. When we talk about land grabbing, land grabbing started decades ago. On that scale, it was 1 million acres. 1 million acres where people were farming, growing food, sustaining their families, thriving, right? 1 million acres were taken by the corporation. And what we had instead were chemicals dumped into the riverways where people were drinking the water, where people were bathing. So when we talk about environment and health, we've got to draw it back to a system of economic exploitation that began, I mean, some of us say a millennia ago, right? With the transatlantic slave trade, but continuing in all its forms of extraction, but most particularly since the Industrial Revolution, extracting resources, rendering communities, particularly Black, brown, indigenous communities, invisible. And when we think about women who are often the center of those communities, our lives have been disrupted for far too long. So race is at the center, right? So I grew up. I grew up with Firestone having these literally golf course. We're here in Sharm el-Sheikh with these resorts, right? Imagine a similar resort with a golf course. Yet workers could not enter that golf course. So literally you could see white people golfing. And the workers on whose backs, right, the resource was being extracted, those workers, We're living in such deplorable conditions, you can't even describe it. And that was 1926, but I'm so sorry to say that's still the same today. You have homes being built, like now, with no indoor plumbing because we are rendered invisible. Our lives don't matter, right? So when we think about the intersectionality of race, it's at the core. So there's so many stories, as we say. We'll share more as we go along, but I'm really honored to be a part of the Green Leadership Trust because we believe that we have to be a part of systemic change, fundamentally changing the systems that are upending our lives. We've got to build a future that we want our children and their children and 7 generations down to enjoy, right? So we believe that women are 50% of the world's population and should be represented fully in all decision-making bodies. Gender justice at its core is why I'm a feminist, right? We also believe that Black, brown, indigenous people, we are 70% of the global population. We are the global majority. All decision-making bodies, including here at COP, must reflect us. Nothing about us without us. And all that connects the environment is about us. So, we're just beginning our conversation. There's so much more to say, but race is at the heart. We've got to fundamentally liberate our people to liberate the world.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. In addition to the story I mentioned earlier, just a little bit about racism and why it's, I guess I describe it as being a core part of me. When I was little, I saw my first Klan rally. I must have been 6, and we were at a park with a bunch of kids from different Catholic schools, Black Catholic schools, none of which exist now, which was part of a great plan, I guess, to rid the city of the Black Catholic environment. And the Klan, this is back when everybody wore masks and everything, and so you never knew who could be your neighbor, right? Well, not our neighbors, but it could be someone you worked for. Right, the Ku Klux Klan, the white supremacist group that, for, decades, centuries, have terrorized, murdered Black people for things ranging from, and including my family. We grew up hearing the stories about how Uncle so-and-so was murdered for looking at a white woman, or for not walking on the opposite side of the street, or for not saying yes sir, yes ma'am, things like that. And so I saw, we grew up with that fear, of, white supremacist culture and attitude. And that would have been one of the first things, that's one of the first things that I remember. And I think in high school, I went to a majority white high school, and I still experienced segregation in that regard. I mean, when I went to college in the 70s, they were still hanging people from trees in downtown Mobile. And I remember they also still had the white and Black only water fountains, meaning that if you were Black, you could not drink from the white water fountains. And this is in the 70s, y'all. And when I went to graduate school in Boston at Harvard, they were still busing people with the National Guard. And that was in the 1990s, the end of 1989, yeah. And so I do want to say that, race is integral to me. And there was a period in time where I was naive, and when I went to graduate school to get my PhD, I remember the first day I was walking down the hall, and I had a bag of animal dye that I was making, and I had on jeans and T-shirt, and a white guy was yelling down the hall at me because I didn't come and empty his garbage. And that's when I realized that the first thing people see is color, and it doesn't matter how many degrees we have or or what we do. And, even though we're taught to do our best and to achieve and to prove ourselves, and it took me a long time to realize that we are, we are there. I am good enough, better than enough, right? And it took a while for that, because you were taught, not only growing up but also in schools, that you had to do more, twice as much, to be thought half as good, right? And the same thing in law schools, the same situation. And a lot of the minority students only knew lawyers because somebody in their family needed one, right, to be bailed out, whereas a lot of our classmates who were white were coming from a long line of lawyers, and were coming into a family of lawyers and already had jobs before. So race has always been an integral part of everything that I've done. And then as I started, I guess, learning more and looking at the intersections, which is a big part of who I am, how things are related, I started looking at where we live, and I can personalize that. And then, like, my mom is a 6-time cancer survivor, and I believe in my heart that that's because of where she lives, which is the same area where people have had respiratory problems, and people have died from numerous rare cancers, right? And we might use the term cancer cluster, but we're told that there is no cancer cluster, because usually that occurs, in my opinion, when they're minority communities. So so for me, that's why race is important, because if we don't represent ourselves and speak up for ourselves and recognize patterns of behavior and attitudes, then we're not going to get, we're not going to make change. And change isn't going to occur without us. So.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. Thank you all. And we welcome our sisters from WEACT who just came in. So, whoop, whoop. They're co-sponsoring the Climate Justice Pavilion again, the first ever Climate Justice Pavilion at the UNFCCC, which is both a celebration and a shame. So it's a blessing that they really pulled that together, and it took a lot of work. I'm sure they were going to have as many gray hairs as I do by the end. So anyway. So I wanted to ask another question. In some ways, you've already begun to answer this question, but as a black woman, how do you see black women experiencing double jeopardy with gendered and racialized impacts of climate change? And can you tell us a story that illustrates these intersectional impacts?
Around that question, we know as women, in general, we're the most affected by all this climate change, the climate crisis. But we, like you said, we're double vulnerable side. I'm so sorry for that word. For me, it's like a and as black woman, it's even the double, our bodies have been through a lot, from the colonialism time. We have been struggling as women in our way that we have been perceiving what is our life or what is our vision of future. For me, as a Black Afro-Indigenous person, I have been working in the activism as a woman, in the sense of bringing the voices of my people, but also of the women of my community that have been living all this trauma. Because we're the ones that, in my island, the first time I lived a hurricane, I was 10 years old. And I remember just waking up the morning after the hurricane, coming out of the bunker with my mom, and we seeing our entire home destroyed, and seeing her cry, seeing her all her struggle, all her work, she being a single mom, it literally break my heart. And that was the moment I start thinking how can I help my mom so she don't have to be crying and always like losing stuff, you know? So like understanding that we're so vulnerable in burial stage, not only on the local level, but in the international level, and all these policies that have been wronged to us, like really putting us in this position that the way that we're to recoup and regain our power, because we have put in this space where like the system has taught us that we don't have any power, or as black folks we are on like this like level that we cannot like speak up for ourselves, we cannot like be in the spaces of like decision making, or really understanding what the course of what is going on. I'm like yeah, for me is I get like a bit emotional always when I talk about like living in a frontline community, being a woman, also like being part of the system in Colombia, because we're from the global, we're all from the global south, but I am part of the Latin American view of race, of yeah, so like for me, when I went to university was the craziest moment of my life, because there was when I understood that I was a black woman, because in my community we live like in this generous way, and we don't understand ourselves like the color to be like something that really distinct you from the others. You are all the same. But when I went to university, like studying environmental engineering, I started to understand like why are black people living in the most affected areas, contaminated areas. In Colombia, we have spaces like Buenaventura, Chocó, where they're living mining pollution, we're living exploitation of our forests, we're being displaced because we're black communities. And the ones that have been more affected by it is the women that do the farming, that keep life going in the communities, but also the children and the girls, yeah? So I start understanding like the structure, the systematic racism, and how it affects in all the levels, in the education level, in the health level, because we have like the lessest access to good medicine. We're also, due to contamination, we're having like issues with our bodies of like women's. I myself, I can say like I am part of the women that have health issues around their uterus by living in like really polluted environment, you know? So yeah, it's really, is a core thing we must talk about when we're talking about climate justice, is understanding how it affects like black, indigenous, and local communities, woman bodies, because it's not the same, and it's not the same level. We have been pushed into these spaces like here, my friend says, like we have been pushed to live in these ecosystems, or in these polluted areas, or in these areas that no one should be really living in, and that has affected us like deeply, not only in our bodies but also in our psyche, like we say, like so for me, like I'll repeat, like it's core to understand that in the racial justice and the climate justice, the gender equity, but also understanding as black people, as black women, that we should be like core in this dialogue around climate justice. Because without us, I always say like healing comes from the womb, and like our earth is asking us, like she wants to heal, she needs a nurturing, and nurturing come from us, like from the women's. So yeah, and black women's, we're the core in this, and we must be part of the solutions.
Thank you. One of the things that you say that really identifies with me is how when I go to the US, there is this awareness that I'm black. So I shared with Anne in July when I went to the US that there is this woman who just came to pick us from the queue at the immigration and then told us to join the faster queue. And then when we got there, our passports were stamped very quickly and then we left. And then this white woman came to me to try to understand why I was picked. So I didn't know what to say, but I was just feeling so, this woman is actually saying that you are a black person, you didn't deserve to be served first. It was I who was, because she kept saying, you know, she came in the queue and picked you. She came and picked you. And then I said, you are making me very uncomfortable. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm so uncomfortable. I'll get my bag, I'll go. But, you know, the injustice with the climate crisis on black women is that a lot of the areas where they do not want to finance, black women are doing it for free. They're doing it for free. You know, when we talk about the issue of loss and damage, that it has been placed on the agenda, or it is going to be discussed in 2024. And then when we look at the climate crisis, how the crisis has caused so much devastation on families. And when we talk about families, the majority of the people that are working on the land are black women, right? They are the ones who are performing care work, whether that care work is paid for or unpaid for. But when there is a crisis, when there is a climate-induced disaster, that care work increases. And therefore, when we say that we do not have money for loss and damage, when we all know that black women are going after the disasters to pick up the pieces, and life continues. And it is because of how the labor of black people and black women particularly, it is undervalued, it is made invisible, just as it is invisible currently. When we talk about the rising sea level, I have been to Senegal so many times. The women are improvising so that they can be able to live. Women are having to take care of children. They are having to take care of the sick, because the climate crisis is also a health crisis. It has brought in more cases of malaria, zoonotic diseases, because of all this destruction that is taking place because of extractives. And black women are the ones who are carrying this disproportionate burden. All the people that cannot afford healthcare services, they are the peasants, they are the indigenous people, they are the black women who are having to even subsidize governments who are failing to take care of their sick. The health systems are broken across the continent, across Africa. Health systems are broken. In poor people's neighborhoods, there are no health facilities to talk about. But where are the sick people going? Women are taking care of that. When we talk about energy poverty, when I was doing my PhD, I was focusing on energy, on energy in Zimbabwe and across Africa. And this is documented, right? That women die from indoor pollution because of not having access to clean and affordable energy. But when you look at who is hosting these mega energy projects, they are the women. They are the women. They are the women who are affected by the climate crisis because of the greenhouse gas emissions. But they are not benefiting from electricity. They do not have electricity. Some women suffer from spinal injuries. They have to carry very heavy loads of firewood, right? For anyone in Africa, that is what we know. Women have to fetch firewood. And all the energy projects are not benefiting the women. What women are having to pay for a lifetime of caring for everybody, is dying from pollution, dying from spinal injuries. And this is why I always say, when we, as indigenous women, as black women, we say no, I often say, what would it mean if, for example, we would say, we are not going to cook. Let's forget about this is my household, right? Because our lives, the way we live our personal lives, are a reflection of this bigger political system that is perpetuating the injustice. Sometimes I feel like, those in power, the majority of who are male, probably they'll do something. When they would just go one day hungry and the children are nothing has been done, probably something would be done. And this is where we are saying, as black women, we are suffering from double jeopardy. That our spouses, our partners, if they are male, they have the patriarchal dividend, right? And then our sisters in the struggle, they have white privilege. We have none. We have none. And this is why I will repeat, we need the race issue to be on the agenda. If we can have gender on the agenda, gender is an identity. Being black or being white or brown or yellow is an identity. So where are we missing one of our multiple identities from the agenda? This is my question.
Yes, the key questions. As I said before, I have one foot on each side of the Atlantic. So if it's okay, I'm going to give two examples of the climate crisis and its impact. The first comes from home, Liberia. And I'd like to, because we often talk about sea level rise, right? We're along the Atlantic. And for me, the most heart-wrenching, and again, it's not a decade away, it's happening now. It's been happening for the last several years. But there's a community in Monrovia called Waterside. Waterside is where there was sort of a popular market for those who like the African clothes and all of that. That was a place to get the African clothes, Waterside, right? But it was also a place where many women, as market women, were sellers. So now what you have, because of the rising sea, people have, the land is literally already underwater, right? So what used to be homes, literally already now, under the sea. What used to be market stalls, under the sea, right? Not a decade from now, already today. So what happens then when people have lost their homes and they've lost their livelihoods? The pressure on families that were already at the brink in precarious economic situations, that pressure becomes so hard to bear. So what we're seeing, and again, Liberia is coming through 26 years of war where people had to survive. What you're seeing is women essentially without economic means having to make really difficult choices on how to put food on the table for their children, right? Today. And what you're also seeing is the push, climate migration, the push factor is key. Because without a home, without a livelihood, it is human nature to try to find a better way. So what you see, not just from Liberia, but the Gambia, Senegal, as you mentioned earlier, all along the coast, people are taking these dangerous routes to find a better life. And we see the results, right? We see daily, the numbers are just heart-wrenching of people who are losing their lives on this path to a better life. Those that finally somehow make a way, some to Europe, many to South America. And so you have a trek of Africans that are coming through South America, through the US southern border, and going through these horrific human trafficking experiences, right? So when we think about the climate crisis, the repercussions are far-reaching, from a family to a global society, right? But in the US, and what I'm really worried about is around the world, you have this rising fascism, white supremacy, that is essentially stopping borders, saying you can't cross that border. Doesn't matter what your circumstances. Recognizing that people have no choice because of the rising seas, because of the climate crisis that is caused by fossil fuel extraction, caused by a racialized capitalist economic model that has failed us, right? But yet those borders are being shut. And our lives are being put in even more grave danger. So the stories are many, but I think we've got to draw the dots, right? Understand the connections of the climate crisis to the harm being done to women and children in particular, right? And to the harm that's being done by systems that oppress us because of our race, because of our gender, because of our sexuality often, right? It is all these forms of oppression that are stopping our people from that human nature of trying to find a better life for themselves, for their children, for future generations. Many more stories to tell, but just wanted to bring those in the mix as we continue our conversation.
Thank you. I think I mentioned I was a toxicologist. One of the issues that I really am interested in and focus on or bring up or lift up is the issue with women and environmental exposures, and how things such as reproductive health effects, right, are a big issue. Endocrine disruptors, things that prevent us from being pregnant, things that prevent us from staying pregnant the entire time, things that prevent us from delivering live, healthy children. I wanted to share quickly a story. One of the communities that I've worked in, this one happened to be in Arkansas, lived near a facility owned by the Koch brothers that was, what the Koch brothers is, the Koch brothers are, I think one may be deceased, I'm not sure, entities that, a family that owns facilities like paper mills and pulp plants and all of the things that can be hazardous, and they're usually located, most of the time, all the time, located in communities of color, right? Atlanta, Crossett, Arkansas, I could name more. And the communities that are located in proximity to these facilities are most at risk. Now, the one that I'm referring to is actually produces chemicals for the paper process. And the community, 47 homes on one street, have been affected in so many different ways, although it has not been necessarily recognized by the federal government. But what I wanted to sort of share with you was the fact that one of those most affected was an 8-year-old girl who had uterine cancer, 8 years old. She lived in a house next to a dirt road that had trucks in and out 24 hours a day. And nobody knew what those trucks carried, right? And most times those trucks were not covered. And I'm talking about in the last 6 years. So this is not something that happened in the past and I'm thinking about. In addition, one of the communities that I worked with in Florida, near Tallahassee, that they had a very high level of infant mortality and stillbirths and just babies born too early. And they found out that one of the issues was leaking underground storage tanks. And these are tanks that hold things like gasoline, petroleum, things for facilities from the fossil fuel industry. And also the Department of, I think the Department of Health there was saying, oh, this is pollution from the past, from these facilities, these gas stations that are no longer here. And the community had the knowledge that the facilities the government didn't even have. They were like, no, this is also from this procedure called cattle vat dipping, where farmers would take their cattle, and it was white farmers, would take their cattle and literally walk them down into a concrete vat and out the other side, dripping pesticides and all of that, all along the soil everywhere. And, that's what people were also exposed to. And this is part of that whole issue around cumulative exposure and knowing the history and the importance of community science, right? And yesterday, I know some of you know, was marked as the day where there are 8 billion people in the world. And as we know, half of those are women. More than half of the women who were pregnant had unwanted pregnancies, meaning, in most instances, those pregnancies were forced on them, which is another issue, right? That's another danger of migration. And we talked about climate migration and actually economic migration too, just forced migration. And the premise that women are weak and girls are prey, right? Women and girls are prey, and also in some instances young men and those who are considered to be prey. But these situations, climate change is a threat multiplier. If women are already being affected from environmental pollution, this does nothing but make it worse. Climate change also, as we know, has led to this migration, which puts us more at risk because we don't have the protections in most instances. I mean, when I was coming here, I was told, don't walk alone as a woman. Don't be by yourself. So we have been put in positions that, put us at risk. So that is why gender is a big issue for me.
Thank you so much. So, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, good. So we are at the end of our time, and I want to just give like 30 seconds for each person to just really wrap with something. And I wish that we had time for questions, but hopefully you can speak to people afterwards. But just one kind of comment around this feminist analysis and implications of this notion of race, racism, and climate reparations in the UNFCCC. So if you just want to give like a 30-second, and starting with Adrian and ending with Yershel, a 30-second, and I'll give you my mic, just to give everyone something that you want everyone to walk away with as they leave this session, as they log off of live stream. Thank you.
Thank you. I can do 30 seconds. I want to point out that, or make the point that as gender is not necessarily dependent on race, women generally are considered to be more fragile, more open to be targeted, right? As we considered, we've all heard the term the weaker sex. And I think that what's important to take away here is that as women, our voices together are more powerful than any individual voice, any voice based totally on race. And I think that in order for us to achieve any sort of change, we're going to have to realize that and work together, because no one's coming to save us, and we have to work together to save ourselves and each other.
Yes. +1 on that. Huh? I would also say, I think we have the solutions, you all. Our mothers, our aunties, our grandmothers, great-grandmothers, they knew. So we've got to dig deep for that traditional knowledge that we have as women. as women of color, as black women. We have that. That is our strength. Sometimes it's not written down, but it is healing, right? Through traditional practices. It is farming through traditional practices, agroecology, thinking about how we feed ourselves and our families, right? It is also thinking about energy solutions that will help us for the future, right? So it is making sure that women have access to clean energy opportunities, have access to renewable energy that is women-led, community-controlled renewable energy, right? We have the solutions. So I think we need to lift it up. And for me, I have to say, this is my first COP. I'm still like trying to understand what this all is about, right? But I think it is critical. One of the elements of this of the resolution on race is about creating a focal point on race. I think we've got to think about systemic change. Having a focal point to follow this issue is critical, so that we're here talking, those who are joining us, we're carrying it forward in our activism, in our research, in our analysis, in the work that we do. But we also need it to be in the most senior levels of decision making. So we need a focal point to carry this beyond today, to make sure that we're changing the outcome document not only for Sharm el-Sheikh, but for Dubai and all the other COPs to come. So thank you for being here, and Chisholm Project, thank you for having us and your leadership. Thank you to We Act for the leadership of the Climate Justice Pavilion. Truly, truly honored to work with each of you.
Thank you very much. I almost have nothing to say, but we can never have climate justice without gender justice, right? And we cannot have climate justice and gender justice without race justice. And what we should come together, and we really need solidarity from our sisters in the North, our comrades in the North, for justice to be there for the African women, indigenous women, the working class women as well. We need that solidarity, and what we are fighting for is actually that as a people, as the whole world, we live in harmony with nature, and we are saying that the indigenous people, the peasants, the black people, we have been living in harmony with nature for a very long time, and the world has failed. We do have the solutions. If only you can
Yeah, so for me, like, just like being here, like, I'm so honored to be in these spaces with black, powerful women. Like, it's just such an honor, and it's like the reflection of what we need to continue happening. So for me, like, my key takeaway from this space is that we need more platforms like this. We need to have these type of conversations. We need that solidarity among us, among all of us. And just to give like this one last data, like here at COP, the percentage of women that in the decision-making tables, like we're represented here, yeah, we have a lot of women this time at COP, but like really the women's at the core center of the decision-making, only the 33%, and that has to change at the UNFCCC. Like we have to be part of it, like core point. So yeah, and like my sister said, there is no climate justice if there is no gender justice, and if there is no gender justice if there is no racial justice. So yeah, I'm very honored, and thank you for having me, for having us here, and for making us stand here at COP. Yeah.
So that concludes this powerful panel. Thank you all. Yeah, thank you.